Okay, once we get the live stream is here, we will begin. So that's in a few seconds. Right, we begin formally now. So we are live streaming and recording. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. This is the 106th edition of our Zoom public meeting. For 105 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. In the past 2 years, 2 months and 2 weeks, we have featured over 342 presenters from all parts of the world speaking on 105 topics. We wish to sincerely thank all those who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora project. Our chairperson today/tonight is Janine Gilhari from Belize in Central America, also considered part of the Caribbean. She is a young businesswoman who has her own fashion brand called House of Gilhari. She graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's in fashion design and fashion business management. Janine, welcome and please chair the meeting. Unmute. Or Robin has to unmute you. Right.
Thank you, Dr. Mahabir, for the welcome. It's always a pleasure to be here with all of you. Good night, good morning, good evening. Namaste, assalamu alaikum to all of you, depending on your time zone. Because as you know, there's people from all over the world in this platform, which is really amazing. We'd also like to remind everybody who hasn't done so already to register and join the ICC 1-week cultural tour to Trinidad and Tobago from August 4th to the 11th, which is this year. It will be a physical meeting and get together of people who see one another only virtually. So I think it's a great experience and a great opportunity for everybody to actually come together and just explore Trinidad and all it has to offer. Now, as you know, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, which is a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And in order to make this program bigger and better, as with all things, if you have any suggestions or opinions on how we can improve, please contact Dr. Mahabir. Also, if a donation is within your possibilities, contact Dr. Mahabir for those details. Our moderator for tonight / this evening is Ms. Shalima Mohammed, the co-director of the Zoom platform. She's also a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the United States. Also, Shalima, welcome and please take over.
Thank you so much, Janine. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. We're especially pleased that you could join us at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, today's public meeting will take the form of a panel discussion, as has been the case previously. So I'll ask you to please mute your microphone unless you have to speak. The microphone symbol is at the lower left corner of your screen. The background noise can be a little distracting and we would want to avoid that. So today's meeting should not exceed 2 hours, and we are talking today about the issue with people's non-English names. So why are we discussing this? In Trinidad and Tobago, this topic was brought to the fore in a newspaper article published at the start of Indian Heritage Month in the Caribbean, which was on May 1st, by political scientist Dr. Winford James. In his article, Dr. James tried to dissect the syllables of an Indian name and ascribed a vulgar meaning to it. I won't call out the names that were stated, but the shaming of Indian names by Dr. James, a former university linguistics lecturer, especially during Indo-Caribbean History and Heritage Month in May, was followed up by Camille Robinson Regis, a female minister of government in an African majority party. She called out the entire name of the opposition leader, Kamla Sushila Prasad Bisasa of the UNC, which is the Indian majority party, 3 times consecutively. There was raucous laughter by her followers at their political forum, but the comedy eluded many people. It is odd and somewhat personal when people are addressed by their first, middle, maiden, and marital names 3 times consecutively. The opposition leader responded by asking on her political platform, "Why are you calling my name?" Further, she said, "Keep my name out of your mouth. At least I have a name from my ancestors. You have the name of a slave master." There was an uproar for a week, and it continues. We felt it was important to discuss why is there an issue with non-English names, and more specifically, why are Indian names to be ridiculed? Before I bring on our panel of speakers for today, I will ask our IT manager, Robin, to please show a short video on the subject to contextualize it in the controversy that is still raging in Trinidad. Robin, can you bring that up now, please?
But in the interest of being fair and unbiased, this failed politician got up onto a stage and was essentially making fun of, in a backhanded kind of way, Kamala Prasad Bisessa's name. Apparently, Kamala Prasad Bisessa has another name that I didn't know. I went to school for years learning about these politicians, and I did not know that Kamala Prasad Bisessa actually had a name, Sushila. So it's Kamala Sushila or Sushila Prasad Bisessa. Anyway, so Camille Robinson Regis, keep that name in the back of your mind, it will come back up later, it's very important, was making fun of Kamala Prasad Bisessa's name. Now, I don't think even she expected Kamala Prasad Bisessa to respond so aggressively. Kamala Prasad Bisessa went straight for the jugular. She responded, "What problem you have with my name? What's wrong with my name, Camille? At least I have the name of my ancestors. Where you got yours from? Your name is that of the slave masters." Talk about a low blow. Now, that brings us to present day and why I have to defend Kamala Prasad Bisessa. Because this failed activist right here, Wendell, keep that in mind again, Wendell Eversley, didn't like what Kamala Prasad Bisessa said. So he went in front of the Red House, and this is what, the Red House to me is too accessible, but more on that later. This is what he had to say.
Tomorrow morning, I will be gathering here along with other African brothers and sisters, and then we will make our way to the opposition leader office, calling on her to resign. The reason why what she did on a political platform about 4 days ago is an attack on every African in Trinidad and Tobago, and not only in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean, and not only in the Caribbean, in the United States of America, in Canada, in Europe. What she did by saying that how we get our name by our slave masters. So what she's saying to us, that we are still slaves.
You all realize the irony of what he just said? He said it's an attack on every African in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, not only in the Caribbean, but in Canada, in Europe, in America. So it's an attack on all Africans in every other continent except where Africans originated, Africa. How do these people just get media time? How does CSE3 give this man a whole media post? Send out a press person to record this foolishness? Anyway, let me get to the crux of the matter. African people, leave this one alone. We have more pressing issues. Plus, this is an argument by which, yes, there was a low blow, but it was 100% true. Fighting this will only make us look more foolish. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You ever realize, if you ever work in public service or anywhere we have to take or give names or call roll or whatever, you can often tell a Chinese, you can often tell an East Indian just by the name. If not the first, the last name. There are some outliers, but 9 times out of 10, you can tell a person's ethnicity based on what name they have. But some of you all who are most upset now by what the opposition leader said, when you all had a chance to name your children, you all went to the French name list, you all went to the Spanish name list, you all spent hours looking over European names, you all looking at Viking names, but when it comes to the African name list, you all skip that page quick. When last did I see somebody named Abdallah? No, them names not common, it's not popular, it's not a Chelsea, it's not a Tommy, it's not a Billy. You always give your children names that don't even make sense in the English language. Look at this here, you will name your child that and then say the X is silent. Okay, the X is silent, but what the hell is the rest? Then they go say, well, it's Wilhelmina. What part of that is Wilhelmina? And when you tell these people these things, they just get upset. Mind you, it's your child. You can name your child whatever whatever you want. Nobody can tell you otherwise. It's your choice to give your child a European name, an African name, an Asian name. You do you. But don't dare get upset when someone calls us out on it, because it's 100% goddamn true. Many of us are walking around here with the names of our slave masters. And when we have the opportunity to name our children something different, African names just don't sound good to us, because we have been brainwashed to know that Chelsea, Megan, Billy, Tommy, Andre, these names are popular. But Abdullah or Abzilla or Abina, these names, these are names of terrorists. Don't get upset. It's true.
So there are several differences of opinion on this. And in order to fully ventilate the origins, I want to bring on our first speaker today, and that is Dr. David Stubron. Dr. Stubron is an education consultant with a Ph.D. in education from the University of the West Indies. He's now preoccupied as an artist representing the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Stubron, welcome. Please share your thoughts for 12 minutes.
All right, well, good afternoon and thanks to everyone. I must say that we are born and we are part of the mass of humanity. And it is by our names that we can be identified as individuals. A person's name holds great significance for the named persons and their families. A name is often the first gift from a parent to a child, and it is used to convey an expectation of the child for the child's honor, esteem, valor, or service. And I will be remiss if I do not commend this forum for spotting the relevance and importance of this topic. And over the past week, it has gained momentum, starting with last week's Sunday's newspapers in Trinidad, where each front page mentioned this sort of spat between the two politicians. And up to today, the leading writers in the newspaper, including Professor Selwyn Kojo, address this issue, this important issue. Now, names give us a sense of who we are, the communities to which we belong, and our current place in the world. According to Dale Carnegie, a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Even in the midst of activities and noise, the sound of your name will still get your attention. Over time, your name shapes your personality along with other environmental factors. Hence, your name is part of your identity. It's what people call you. It's what gains your attention. From infancy, we are called by this name, and it gives us a sense of who you are. Now, Hindu names are sometimes given on the basis of horoscope after consultation with an astrologer or pandit. These names are often influenced by caste, religion, and so on, drawn from the holy books. They can also indicate the region from which the individual originates. For example, we have Biharis from Bihar, Naipals from Nepal. Indian names can also denote the day of the week of birth. So those called Ravi could very well have been born on a Sunday, Mangal on a Tuesday, Shani on a Saturday. The use of surnames have been found to be fairly new in India and brought about by colonization. My grandparents landed in Trinidad with a single name on each of their identity papers. My grandfather was SUBRAN and my grandmother was John Deere. Some Indians have home names by which they are called and official names for the records. African names can convey messages either to an individual, the family, or the community. These names can depict the time of birth, the day, the week, and the individual's position in the family. One researcher believes that there remains a strong belief among the Ashantis that the day of the week on which a person was born had a significant impact on the individual's character and behavior. In the Yoruba tradition, it is not uncommon for each parent and grandparent to contribute at least one name. It is believed that Chinese names can determine a child's fortune, educational prospects, possible career, and even marriage. Chinese names are often individually created for that person and not generic like most other names. Chinese names are different from Western names. They can start with the family name followed by the given name. All the top 100 Chinese family names have only one syllable, and these surnames cover about 85% of mainly Chinese citizens. Years ago in Trinidad and Tobago, people were frequently mocked and belittled on the basis of their names. The victims were across ethnic groups, so that people of Chinese, Indians, African, and even European descent often fell victims to the abusers. I suppose that was part of our development as a nation. One approach was for the abuser to deliberately mispronounce or place emphasis on another's name, so that the result was something vulgar, shameful, or suggestive. A few years ago, not too long ago, a government minister in Trinidad and Tobago sang a comical song lampooning the name of another politician, Munilal Kunilal, repeated 10 times. Now, these are not the only things. My mother was born in St. Vincent of Indian parentage. However, she never got to know her ancestral name because her ancestors landed many decades before, and the authorities assigned the names of the respective plantation owner as the surname of the indentured Indian on that plantation, so that she carried the surname Bailey. And there are Indians in Trinidad today carrying surnames such as Carr, Huggins, and O'Neill. The authorities were not satisfied to simply extract cheap labor from these people, but they insinuated that their Indian names were inferior, unpronounceable, and unsuited for a civilized society. Enslaved Africans often had their original and meaningful names replaced by servile names or biblical names, some of which are still in existence. As a student at UWI in Mona, I was appalled to find that at that time, one's given name was erased among the campus fraternity, and that name was substituted by some sort of comical appellation or nickname. So if at the seat of Caribbean society and education institutions, we have this practice of disgracing people's name, I don't know where we're heading. We have a tradition here in Trinidad and Tobago of nicknames, and this is a sort of bullying. We speak about bullying in the schools, but bullying is extant throughout the society. In several Caribbean countries that I visited as a curriculum consultant, I have been christened Chris Coolie by total strangers. The only difference was that in Jamaica, the Coolie was spelled with a K. However, it must be noted that over time, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have largely moved away from ridiculing people on the basis of their names. But there have been lapses. As mentioned just now, 1 month ago, a Guardian columnist, a colleague of mine at the University of the West Indies, wrote an article entitled "The Shame of My Name," in which he analyzed the Indian names on the basis of how these names sounded in English. I consider this article to be a thinly disguised attempt to snipe at the Indians in the population, which was totally unbecoming of a linguistics lecturer. The noted linguist later apologized. As citizens of certain countries, the general populace often have expectation that one must have an English name in order to be acceptable. As a former school teacher, I was amazed to see that some girls did not wish to be called by their Indian names and renamed themselves among their friends, taking names from the latest television soaps. So they call each other Tiffany and Chelsea and these sort of things. I think there is really a need for community leaders to enlighten young people about the significance of their ethnic names so that they use their names with pride. And when ridiculed, they can respond appropriately given the meanings of their names. Ridicule of people's name can be the ultimate disrespect that one can impose on a fellow human being. And it is an indicator of the vileness of some human beings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stubron. That was quite an enlightening presentation. To members of the audience, I'd like you all to know that you have the opportunity to ask questions of Dr. Stubron at the end of all the presentations. So I see some questions and comments coming in the chat, and we welcome that. I'd like to tell you, though, that you will have an opportunity to pose your questions directly to our speakers as we go further. So I'll introduce our second speaker, and that is Dr. PRITHIVIRAJ Bahadur Singh. He's a community pediatrician who works mainly with children with disability. He's also the coordinator of the Shivganga Yatra procession with the Chinmaya Mission in Trinidad. His presentation was pre-recorded, and our IT manager, Robin, will share that with you now.
Good afternoon to everyone. Sitaram, Namaste. This afternoon, I am going to speak about the power of a name. My name is Dr. PRITHIVIRAJ Bahadur Singh. I'm a pediatrician. I'm also a lecturer in child health at University of the West Indies. While I was training in England, I did a diploma in Ayurveda with Middlesex University. I've also been teaching beginner Sanskrit at Chinmaya Mission, Trinidad and Tobago. I also do a Bhagavad Gita study class on Wednesdays. This is our online study class. So today we're going to speak about the power of names. So, name. Name is an English word. In Sanskrit, the word is nama. So these words are related. Nama and name. If you look at nama from a Vedantic point of view, the syllables are na and ma. With na, if you stretch the a sound, becomes na, and so there's na and ma. Na gives the sense of not, and ma refers to me. Mama, the word mama in Sanskrit means my. So na ma actually means not me. From a Vedantic point of view, this has a very deep spiritual meaning. It gives the idea that even though we are given a name, we are originally nameless. We are spiritual in nature at the deepest level. Interestingly, nama resembles nama. Nama in Sanskrit means I bow. Means I bow to the divinity in the other person. So both nama and nama reminds us of our underlying divinity. So the word nama has a very deep meaning in Sanskrit. So names are very powerful. Now, mantra, the word mantra, which is now commonly utilized in the English language also, mantra. Man means mind, and tra, which means protect. So mantra means that which protects the mind. Mantras in Sanskrit, when chanted, it helps to bring greater divinity to the personality and to the mind. Now, Sanskrit language in itself has great mantric power, and this mantric power is there in Sanskrit names also. So names have meaning and vibration, and names also have mantric force in them. Hence the reason that names are so important, because names have meaning, vibration, and there is mantric force in names. Hence naming ceremonies are very important. In many cultures, or all traditional cultures, naming ceremonies are extremely important, and names are chosen because of their meaning and the power behind the names. And in Sanskrit, it's the mantric power behind the name that is very important. Now, in Hinduism, in Sanatana Dharma, naming is one of the 16 sanskaras. And it's very important, sanskara, choosing a name for a child. So names are very, very important. Sanskrit itself is an ancient language, and it belongs to the Indo-European language family. It's a sister language of languages like Latin, German, Russian, Lithuanian, as well as English and other languages. And all these languages have a relationship to Sanskrit and Sanskrit root words. In fact, many words in English, you can find Sanskrit roots, which these English words are related to. So, for example, the word sta, root in Sanskrit, from that you get stand, for example, standing, gives a sense of stability. So sta is a Sanskrit root. And there are many English words which relate to the Sanskrit root, for example, sta. So just an example. Now, when it comes to names, all names in all cultures should be respected. And from my viewpoint is that it's good to seek to understand the meaning of names from the culture from which a name arises. We can also seek to understand the power of names from different cultures in different languages by trying to understand the common sort of vibrational force in these names and the meaning of the names. So to kind of illustrate this point, I'll give some examples from my own reflection. So let's take the word Om. So Om, spelled A-U-M or O-M, and U join to form O, which is why you can spell Om as A-U-M or O-M. M is the nasal sound in Om. So Om is considered a universal primordial sound and represents universal consciousness. So, for example, in Hindi or Sanskrit, you can give a child the name Om, for example. Other names in Sanskrit like Umesh, Omkara. Right? So this Om represents universal consciousness. Now that sound Om is there in other names in other languages. For example, Omar, Omari in Arabic. These names mean long-lived or flourishing. Omari in Swahili means God is exalted. Omaha in Hindi means a person of great joy. Omit in Hebrew means my light. And Omid in Persian means hope. So all these names have the Om sound at the beginning of the name. And it's interesting that all these names have exalted meanings. So it's really interesting when you look at it. Names in different cultures, different languages, but the sound vibration has Om. These two names, Hari and Huddy. I always found it really interesting that these names are so similar. Hari is a common English name. It comes from Germanic, Heimrich. So Heim meaning home and Rich meaning power or ruler. So the ruler of the home. Okay. So the word Hari, in a sense, means a ruler. And Hadi, which is the name for Lord Vishnu, is a form of Ishvara, and he is considered the one who sustains this creation, sustains the Leela, this play of existence. When we look at the letters in Hadi, the root sounds, when I was looking at the explanation given from Sri Aurobindo in terms of the meaning of these seed sounds, like ha gives a sense of force. It's a guttural sound, ha. Then ra relates to vibration or play, and e, relative existence. So in a sense, you can see how the word Hadi, the meaning would have formed. In that Hadi is the one who sustains this vibrational existence that exists. And it's really interesting that Hari and Hadi have similarity in terms of what the meanings are, and the names have similar sounding, right? So it's interesting. Let's look at Sam. Sam is of Hebrew origin, short for Samuel, and it gives a sense of told by God or God hears. When you look at Sam in Sanskrit, it's not the same exact pronunciation, Sam, Sam, but Sam in Sanskrit is a prefix, and that Sam gives a sense of balance, equipoise, spiritual balance. In the Bhagavad Gita, it said, Samatvam Yoga Uchate. It says yoga can be called as Samatvam. So Samatvam gives a sense of this equipoise, spiritual balance. The word Sant, which means a saint. Sant has that prefix Sam also in the word. And if you think about it, for a person to hear God or to be spoken to by God, in a sense, they have to have the spiritual balance. So it's really interesting if you look at the name Sam, right, and then compare it with this Sanskrit prefix of Sam, right? They're quite similar. If you look at Sue, Sue is a Western name. Sue, Christian name, Sue. Suzanne, right? Sue and Suzanne, in Hebrew origin, they mean like graceful lotus, lily, lotus. And Su is a prefix in Sanskrit, which generally means good or refined. So like Sumati means good thoughts. Sumant means a friendly person. So Su as a sound tends to give that sense of good vibration. And it's interesting that these names and sounds are from different languages, different cultures, but there's similarity. So with these examples, the point I'm trying to make is that names have powerful meaning and vibration. And we can actually seek to understand names from different cultures, different languages, and look at the sounds and the common meanings that there may be with names, and the common strong vibrations that there are in sounds from names from different cultures and different languages. So we should never seek to ridicule or denigrate any name from any culture. And we should seek to improve and uplift ourselves by recognizing the universal power and meaning of names. Okay, so I thank you for listening to my short contribution regarding the power of names. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so great. Thank you very much, Dr. Bahadur Singh. That was quite enlightening as well. And I really look forward to our audience members showing their appreciation and perhaps raising some questions after. Let me introduce you to our third speaker, and this is MARSHA Lorraine Walker. MARSHA is an activist, an author, and a passionate advocate for responsible parenting. She left the corporate world to spend more time with her young daughter. Welcome, MARSHA. Please go ahead and you can make your contribution for 12 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. I I had a presentation prepared until my Indian family got involved. I asked a simple question that turned into what became a very enlightening journey. I'm assuming that I would have been invited to speak as a Christian who continues to carry the name of a slave master, because I would have spoken out in defense of our political leader very strongly. And I know some people say, you know, but you have a slave name, so why I theoretically should have been offended.
Marsha, excuse me.
So,
we have an international audience, and some people may not be aware about political leadership. So maybe you want to clarify that, please.
okay, so I am a member of the United National Congress. I would have run in the general elections 2020, and I am the coordinator, the UNC coordinator for Diego Martin West. So I do have a political background, and so that would be the context. And of course, at the beginning of the Zoom meeting, we would have explained why, Ms. Mohammed would have explained why this topic was chosen, given the context of the whole meeting and the political leader's response to what I consider an ongoing bullying of the Indian community. So why would I, as a Christian with a Christian name and a slave master name, why would I have come out in such strong defense? And so I want to read a poem that's well known to everyone, but it really tells who I guess I am. First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. From a very young age, I have always had an issue with injustice, and it didn't matter whether or not I was directly impacted. If I thought that someone was being bullied, if I thought that injustice was occurring, I always spoke out. Funny enough, my name, Marsha Lorraine, well, Riley would have been my maiden name. So I'm going to use Marsha Lorraine Riley for the purpose of this presentation. My dad had that name 50 years ago when my eldest brother, who is 50, when his mom was pregnant, my dad said, if it's a girl, we're naming her Marsha Lorraine Walker. And it was a boy. 2 years later, another boy. If it's a girl, Marsha Lorraine Walker. 2 years later, third pregnancy. If it's a girl, Marsha Lorraine Walker. 7 years later, Marsha Lorraine Riley came. And for me, that was it. You know, this was my dad. My dad had a name for me from ever since. And that story made me feel so special every time I heard how much he wanted a girl and how much this name was going to be Marsha Lorraine Riley. And it always gave me a sense of closeness to my dad. It always gave me a sense of being wanted, being, you know, like he yearned for this Marsha Lorraine Riley. Later on in life, and it's just so ironic because people dub me as the fighter. And the name Marsha, believe it or not, the root of the name comes from the Roman god of war. It means to war. So there is something very providential, I believe, in your name. Without even understanding the root of my name, growing up, I was always the person standing up for the underdog. I was always the person willing to fight. I was always the person willing to not be liked, to stand for justice. And lo and behold, I was named after the Roman god of war. So I do believe that someone's name is precious to them. And I think when you insult it, it's the deepest insult that you can put on someone. Growing up, I remember people used to call me Corily Bush, because it's the way that we always went to someone's name when we wanted to insult them. So to think that Camille Robinson Regis was simply calling her middle name is to lie. And that was why I responded so passionately, because we would have seen silence when the Indian community, and I do look at it as the Indian community, time and time again, they are ridiculed by the PNM government, and the country seems to be very quiet about it. And so if my place in life, if that is my God-given role, is to speak out and to use my Christian name and my Christian voice to speak out on behalf, then so be it. And so that would have been why I took such a strong stance on something that technically would not have impacted me directly. I'm asking you to permit me to give you an insider's view, growing up in a Christian community, how we were so subconsciously colonialized. I remember, even before being in politics, I remember when the Trinity cross was changed. I remember being told, you see, if you vote UNC, they'll change everything. They'll make you be Hindu. That was a similar experience to NJAC, where there was a ground campaign that said, you know, if you vote for NJAC, they'll make you wear the shiki and they'll make us all change our names. And there was, and you know, even thinking about it, okay, so what? You know, so what? Which is false, but so what? What was the fear? Why was there such a fear? Why was there such a shame to embrace our ancestry? Why the need to feel as though that there was a baggage? And so there definitely was a subconscious colonial conditioning that was happening. I'm going to give you a story again, just so that you can see how deep this goes in those with Christian names and Christian religions being conditioned to believe that they are superior, which is wrong. You know, and I'm standing here as a Christian with a Christian name saying it's wrong. I remember my Indian aunts coming over, and, you know, she was asking, you know, can you get me some roti? But she had said paratha. And I did not know the difference between sada and paratha. And she was just so flabbergasted, because my mom's side of the family are proud Indians. I'm a fifth generation proud Indian. And she could not believe that someone who had so much rich Indian heritage at 12 years old did not even know the different type of roti I should be cooking it, much less, you know, not even knowing it. And my brother, who was Catholic and Christian name, was like, she don't need to know that. And because I'm going to a Catholic primary school and I'm from the west of Trinidad and I'm going to a Catholic prominent secondary school. And so that is so beneath her as a young woman, as a modern woman. And that is just to show the conditioning, you know, the way that we grew up thinking that we were superior, that I didn't need to know about roti and all of that. Years later, thank God, and I have to say that maybe there was some link, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to presume to know. After I had made it in the corporate world, after I had already attended, you know, the St. Joseph Convent, and I've already proven myself, there was a yearning, there was a deep desire to understand my Indian roots. And my Aunt Jenny started to teach me to make roti and whatnot. And when I went away to England, I stayed with someone who was from India. And she had had children in England. And she could not believe that I had known so much about my Indian heritage. And her first generation children did not know anything about their Indian heritage. And that was the first time that I felt a sense of pride to be able to represent my Indian culture. And so today now, if I had to defend Nicole, I would defend it with even more vigor. Because in preparing for this presentation, you know, my aunts and my uncles all came together, and, you know, the conversation of how my great grandmother came on the ship, you know, and the struggle, and for us to just simply insult a name and laugh at it because we think that we have a Christian name. Today, I am more resolved to say that that's wrong. So today now, I stand as a proud fifth generation, you know, Indo-Trinidadian, to explain that when we stand with our Christian names and think that we are more superior, that is as disrespectful as you can get. And Dr. Subran spoke about, you know, this tradition of nicknames and that form of bullying, and we must begin to call it for what it is. It's bullying. And there is a sense of self-hate, and I have to say that that probably comes from not taking that journey to enlightenment. And, you know, the Bible, I'm Christian, the Bible says that, you can't love someone if you don't love yourself. You love someone with the same measure that you love yourself. So I can only say that it has to be coming from a place of self-hate, that you can spew such hate and disgust for someone. It has to be a place of jealousy, that maybe you want the same enlightenment that another community has. But the bullying must stop. And the one thing that I know is that you will never stop a bully by ignoring them. You must face them head on. And as I say, today, I stand even more resolved in the pushback of the political leader, because we must begin to respect Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, I have a Christian name. So obviously I respect those who have chosen to remain with their Christian names. I do believe in Christianity. You know, and that's not from me just being a blind follower of what my parents told me. So I believe that if we are to move forward as a country, you know, Trinidad and Tobago, and as a society, as humans, as the human race, we've got to come from a place of respect. We must respect each other. We must respect the decisions, whether it be a decision to keep your slave master's name, and it's true, and that's what it is. I keep my slave master name, and I can say it proudly because that's the name that my dad gave me, and he may not have understood what he was doing, but he loved it and he named me, and that comes from a place of confidence. And so I can face it. You can say it to me and it will be okay. So I have to question that if you are triggered, then there is some trauma, there is some self-hate that's going on that has to be addressed. And we have to heal if we are to move forward as a community, as a country, as a nation, as a globe. We have to heal, because hurt people hurt people. So I commend this forum, because these are the hard discussions that we need to have, where we can, without fear of victimization, without fear of being bullied, we have to be able to say the hard things, say the uncomfortable truths. That is the only way that we will move forward as one people, hopefully under one UNC umbrella. And I want to urge that we continue to maintain respect for people. And now that you guys know that I am a proud fifth generation Indo-Trinidadian, if you mess with my family, I am going to fight back. So thank you very much for including me in the conversation. It was very open of the panel to think of someone with a Christian name to give their bit of inside perspective. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Marsha, and I'll ask you to please stay with us so that you can take some questions going forward and some comments as well. Please read the chat. I think one of the things that you raised, a question that you raised that's a very significant one, is why is there baggage connected with our ancestry? And this goes back irrespective of ethnicity. So we should explore that. Thank you very much. Let me now introduce our fourth and final speaker, and this is Mr. OPUKU WARE. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. He is a political, social, and cultural activist based in Tobago, a former Senior TUCO calypso member and band leader, and the 1981 NJAC candidate for Tobago East. Welcome, Mr. WARE. Is he here? He was here.
I am not seeing him again.
Hello?
Oh, okay. He's here.
Great.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. Good. Yes.
Yes.
We're hearing you.
Yeah, hearing me well, good. Well, a pleasant good afternoon to you, the organizers, and to all the brothers and sisters across the globe. Now, as we know, our name is the only possession that survives us after death. That is how important it is. And that a name gives a sense of identity which helps to facilitate unity. The problem, one of the major problems for the African in Trinidad and Tobago is that the colonial masters did a fantastic job in turning him and her into mimic men and women. In other words, what the colonials did is that they stripped away the African value system, they took away his name, they took away his language, and then they created him back into a mimic man then, a man to mimic the British, mimic the French, mimic the Spanish. So that without that sense of identity, he developed a sense of self-hate. And over the years, the African leadership, to a large extent, not in every extent, but to a large extent, have betrayed the African masses. And with the coming of our brothers and sisters from India, we have to understand that a lot of the brothers and sisters who came down here from India were engaged in an anti-colonial struggle in India against British imperialism and colonialism in India. So this is why they could have stood up when they needed to stand up against the injustices being faced here. To the credit of the African, he and she never really stopped fighting. But the problem was the leadership. For example, Dr. Williams, who is touted to be this master historian and so, and who founded the PNM, had a major role to play in the divisions within this society, Trinidad and Tobago, between the two major races, the African and the Indians. Because before William's time, when Butler and Kola Rienzi, an Indian, and Butler and African, were battling against the colonial rulers for a better deal for the oppressed races, the Africans and Indians, there was no problem. The African sugar, the African in the oil industry, the Indians in the sugar industry, they got together. They formed bonds of unity and fought against the colonials in the 1930s. In fact, it was the Indian masses who hid Butler. That is why they couldn't find Butler. And even it was the Indians who bought Butler, have given his first motor car so he could move around to mobilize. So there was this unity between the Indian masses and the African masses because we were going through oppression from colonial rulers. With the coming of Eric Williams and the coming of party politics, that started to develop a kind of racist, a stupid, nonsensical, racist outlook between African and Indian. Because what you're fighting for, you have nothing. The best thing was to unite. And in order to have a serious and a strong Trinidad and Tobago, we must have unity, right? But we'll come back to unity. But the point is that Williams started, and the PNM, they started on this anti-Indian campaign because, you know, when I growing up, they say here, if all you allow an Indian to rule here, you'll have to eat grass and this kind of thing, you know? And then the Indian now, in a way, started to back in a corner, like, so the PNM was able to terrorize them in the 1961 election before that by putting the Africans against the Indians and have them, Indians who coming in town to do, what has been to do, like sanitation, who had to shave the head and so on, that kind of thing, terrorizing, unleash. And this is the danger. As a leader who was supposed to be well respected, Williams and they use that to put one race against the other. And that is why we find ourselves in this position. And the only, what happened, what helped to reverse the situation was the rise of Makanda Daga Geddes Granger in 1970. Because he said, well, look, Indians and Africans unite now and fight. So he led a demonstration from Port of Spain down to in the Indian heartland, Caroni, Cuba. The march actually reached Cuba, and to bring about that unity between the Indians and the Africans. And progress was being made because he invaded Central with a series of public meetings, and the Indians decided to shut down the sugar industry and march in town with Daga NJAC on April 21st, 1970. That was the situation, you know. Makanda Daga was going to lead thousands of East Indians, Makanda Daga, Winston Leonard and others, into Port of Spain to join with the Africans in Port of Spain who were going to shut down the industries in Port of Spain where on the port, oil and electricity, water, and so on. And that probably would have been the end of Williams. And that is the reason why Eric Williams declared the state of emergency in 1970, because the Indians were uniting with the Africans to march into Port of Spain. Because Daga recognized, and that is what I would thank him for, as one of the most progressive political thinkers in the last century in Trinidad and Tobago, and they never gave him the credit for it. So initiating that sort of movement in 1970 generated a sort of consciousness, because in 1970 is not just the marching up and down. Eh? And before I move on, I must say that the Indians who were trying to march in town on April 21st, they were brutalized about 5 times by the police. Eh? Every time they try to march, they beat them. They try to march again, they beat them. But the point is that that whole movement generated a consciousness among Africans and Indians who were earning for a chance to control the commanding heights of the society and put in place institutions within the society that could have developed a progressive society to give equality of opportunity to all. So, for example, a new orientation to the education system, a transformation of law and justice to help the masses, and so on. An economic transformation to give, to ensure that everybody had a piece of the action. So that consciousness also had the cultural consciousness. So still the rise of people like, for example, when I was operating in NJAC in the 1970s, I brought the St. Helena Tassa drummers to Tobago, and I believe that is the first time a Tassa drummer team came to Tobago, and they mashed up the whole place. And in that same event I had in Tobago, you had people like the St. James with the drummers and so on. But St. Helena had drummers connected with the people, because the whole thing about Indians and Africans is that Indians and Africans thousands of years ago had a communication between East Africa and India. They crossed the Indian Ocean, they traded and so on. They established communities in India, in East Africa and so on, right? So that the traditions are connected. So that is why that sense of peoplehood that people have praised the Indian cooperative, that people have praised the Indians for, that was the African thing too. But it's just that we get licked up with it during chattel slavery, but the East Indians were able to hold on to certain traditions. But basically, if you look at the fundamentals, the basic fundamentals of African and Indian philosophies and religious ones and religions and so on, there's a basic similarity. But colonialism and the colonial rulers know that in order to rule, because they were not in the majority, they had to keep division. So they divide African against African, Indian against Indian, and then African against Indian. And our backward leaders went down that pathway. So the point is that in 1970, this whole new consciousness was developing. And what part of that consciousness was the thing about changing your names, you know? So we recognized that the names we had were slave names, you know? So that we decided, and other people in NJAC and other organizations, because you had other people who were doing their own thing too, consciousness-wise, decided to make legal name changes. And when we did that, I did mine in 74, I was given my name by Tony McFarlane, Jaja McFarlane, who was the leader of the Black Power movement in Tobago in 1970. And then Makanda gave me my middle name. Now, but the point is that most of us who took these, a lot of us who took these African names came under fire from the backward thinking of the PNM. The kind of half illiterate kind of nonsense they would tell you. Where you get your names, who all in Africa, or you going to this or OPUKU WARE, and all kind of nonsensical rhetoric they could have found to denigrate the fact that you, as an African in the West, who had reached a stage of consciousness, was prepared to make that transformation to take an African name, which is really the ABC, ABC in African consciousness. You start with a name, because a name is not all. Because men taking African name and still doing nonsense. You know, you have to start to learn to live with your people, you know, share your love and so on, you know, it's a whole process. But at least you're making a start, so you could have some sense of identity to carry on. This is like an Indian brother from India who came down here, I think it was during the 70s, and he warned the Indian people. He told them, do not, you say, notice that some of you move into adopting Western names. They said, don't do that at all. Do not stick with your traditions. And this is what we should be doing too. So if the Africans stick with the tradition, the East Indians stick with the tradition, the Chinese stick with the tradition, then we could have respect for each other and unite. But the regime of the PNM is not like that. Because look, for example, I was listening to an interview with one of the founders, one of the great steel band pioneers of Trinidad and Tobago, Bertie Marshall, who was doing electronics in pan, you know, amplifying the pans during the 1960s. Remember that under chattel slavery, the drums were banned, the African drum. So any slave caught beating a drum received 100 lashes. Any slave caught making a drum, the penalty for that was death. But they battle and they look for other ways to continue the rhythms that they brought from the motherland. So they eventually came up with the steel pan, which was a direct descendant from the African drum. And when Bertie Marshall, who was doing this beautiful amplifying up and battling on his own, somebody decided to carry Bertie Marshall to talk to Eric Williams. And I heard it in an interview. And Bertie said, well, I don't know, I don't like to go by no government thing. He said, but they carry me this, so I went. And then he said that Eric Williams told him that he wouldn't take the taxpayers' money to support any foolishness like steel pan. And that is the kind of mentality that the PNM has been perpetuating over the years. And I don't know, I heard Dr. Rowley said that he was awakened by the consciousness of the 1970 movement led by Mukandal Daga. Maybe yeah, because I understand that he was around. And McFarlane, who was leading the movement, told me that he used to talk to Rowley and would try to lecture to him as a young fella. So that, but these fellas have done nothing to the leadership. The Africans who have made it into leadership position have done nothing to enhance the consciousness of the African, to make him understand that, for example, how you will go around trying to denigrate an East Indian name. I mean, since I took my African name, not one East Indian has never tried to denigrate my name. But I can't say the same thing about my people. I mean, we protesting for things like emancipation, and so before it was a national holiday, and I was arrested and beaten in Tobago, they tell me that she all this kind of thing. So that we had the experience of this sort of situation in our society. So that how Kamala Prasad-Bissessar responded, I believe that is a blessing in disguise. It would give a spark to the forward movement, of a new type of consciousness, of an additional type of consciousness. Because at every period of time, it has taken a spark from somewhere to ignite that consciousness movement one time. Garvey did it, Butler did it, Mukandal Daga did it, and now with this one by Kamala, the debate will continue, but what she says, she stood up on truth, she stood up on something that is right, and she stood up on something that we people had to come to terms with, that most of us have adopted not only slave names, but the mentality of the colonials. You know, even in Tobago, we have a heritage festival. Most of the things I was protesting against it, to me, is nothing more than plantation culture. And we got to get them things right. Some of those things, we have to take them and dump them in the bottom of the ocean, because they cannot help to inspire the youths of the land. And unless we develop consciousness of each other, identity, understanding of one another, then the country would not be able to achieve its full potential. To build a strong country, you need unity. To build a strong education system, we need unity. To have strong laws and so on, we need unity. To end crime, we have to have unity. So, brothers and sisters, I'll stop there.
And you stopped in perfect time, sir. Thank you very much. I think you've quite nicely summarized in your presentation the views of many of the presenters. And you also pointed out something that I think we fail to consider when you said that Indians from inception of indentureship were engaged in anti-colonialism back in India. So when they came here, holding on to their ethnic names was one of the ways in which they would have continued with anti-colonialism to some extent in Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to thank you for that. Another important point that you raised was that Camille Robinson Regis's derogatory pronunciation of the opposition leader's Indian name reinforces the PNM's divide to rule policy. And at this point, I think education is what is important. If it is that we don't educate Trinbagonians as to what is the relationship between politics and this whole name thing is, then it would go over their heads. But I want to ask you a question, and ladies and gentlemen, I will come back to invite you to raise your questions. But Mr. Ware, please, I want to ask you a question. What was Winford, in your humble view, what was Winford James's motive for raising the whole Indian name issue? Can you please comment on that?
well, you see, brothers like with Winford James and these fellas, they might have some academic, pedigree, but in terms of consciousness, a lot of those brothers, they are unconscious. They are unconscious Africans, and they're trapped. A lot of them trapped in this anti-Indian thing that the PNM spreading. You remember in Tobago election, in an election in Tobago, they say that that the Indians coming with on the Calcutta ship.
Correct.
To take Tobago, and you see, so a lot of people are still trapped in that kind of ignorance, and that is the kind of political ignorance and backwardness that we have to get rid of. So from time to time, it would come out like it came out with that kind of idiotic article that Winford James wrote. You know?
Right. Thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate your contribution.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to say thank you as well to our other presenters. Thanks for your effort, your expertise, and your availability. I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded live and would be uploaded later on YouTube permanently for posterity. The meeting is also being live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. I want to open the floor now for your questions, your comments, and your contributions. Only those speaking should unmute their microphone. So I will ask you to please indicate that you wish to speak by using the reaction button. At the base of your screen is a reaction button. If you would like to ask a question or raise a comment, please click on the raised hand button in the reaction button. So I will take our first question from Mr. Bahadur Singh. Go ahead, please. Might unmute your mic. Mr. Singh?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. It's not actually a question. I want to make a few statements regarding the origin of Indian names. Indian names, of course, a lot of people spoke about it, but neglected to talk about the difference between last names and first names. Last names depicted our caste and creed. Caste not in a negative sense, but in the formal education, work related. First names were given by the choice of parents as it was looked upon in books. Indians usually used books to look up their, what we call Rasi names. And of course, if you didn't like the name, you kept two names. When my sons were born in the US in 1995, I called South Africa and said, you are 9 hours ahead. Look up what my kid's name should be. But my kids were born on Thursday night and it was Friday there, only to find out that the books we used was written in India, and that was 3 hours time difference. Therefore, it made 1/8 of all Indian names in South Africa incorrect. If you in Trinidad and Tobago uses the same books, it'll make your names 3/8 incorrect, because those books were printed in India and there's a 9-hour time difference. So this was something that I discovered in 95, wrote in a thing called World Diaries, asked to speak on that. So today that is corrected by the computer, where they look up into the astrological depiction of what the constellation is at the time of your birth. They can be very precise about giving you what your name should be, or even if it's off, they'll give you an alphabet. Getting to the US. In the US here, we have a lot of Indians that come and live, and we all still use our Indian names. However, when it comes to work-related stuff, we start using a derivative of our Indian name. My full name is Virendra, and certain of my businesses where Hispanics work, Dra became David. But we still proudly use our Indian names. Weirdly enough, we decided to try to look at our ancestry through ancestry.com, a DNA analysis. And I found out that my wife was from all over the world, and I was mainly from India. So the point is, yes, names are so important, but to trace back our lineage, we Indians in India and South Africa, what we did is, when we have a child, we start using our first name as our last name. So my son will be Shivganga. What happens is you cannot then trace your lineage to India. The Chinese, on the other hand, will never do that. If your last name is Luan, you can trace back your name over 10 generations. So that being said, names are absolutely important in respect to your caste, your creed, not in the negative sense, but who you are. And in Sikhism, to conclude, in Sikhism, because we know that names depict this, Sikhism that followed Hinduism converted all of us to Singhs, so we would have no caste or creed. Thank you.
That's an interesting observation, so I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's now bring on Charlene Murad. Charlene, welcome. Can you unmute?
I think Ravin has to unmute her.
Okay.
Yeah.
We hear you, Charlene.
I think I'm good now. Namaste, everyone. I want to congratulate all the speakers today. Very, very enlightening and indeed very powerful. Even the contribution that was made just recently, very, very powerful. However, I want to take off from where Sister Marsha and Brother OPUKU left. The whole question of the power structure, the political power structure in Trinidad and Tobago leaves me worried as an Indian in this country, leaves me feeling targeted as an Indian in this country. And I am asking, and I'm throwing out this question, where do we go from here when we are seeing what appears, well, not appears, let me remove what we are seeing as a concerted effort to use cultural decimation in one form or the other as a political weapon and a political tool. And that, how do we pull ourselves together and for once and for all, bring a stop to what is happening to the Indian population and by extension, other minority groups. And I would like to throw that out to both Brother OPUKU and Sister Marsha here today.
Okay, Charlene, thank you for that. Marsha, would you like to respond first?
Sorry, can you repeat just the final bits of the question?
Sure. Charlene, repeat, please. Charlene, you need to unmute.
No, Ravin has to unmute her.
Oh, okay.
Ravin. Okay.
I think I'm good now, yes. Yes, Ravin had to unmute me first. The question is that I am left feeling somewhat targeted in a political structure where that is, and a political party that uses cultural decimation to enhance itself, to enhance its political currency. My question is, where do we go from here, both to you and to Brother OPUKU, in terms of bringing some stop to this and to prevent it continuing? Because this, as Brother OPUKU said, this has been going on since Eric Williams' days. This is since 1956, and we are here decades after, and we are fighting the same fight. So I would like to know, where do we go from here as a people?
So there are two schools of thought, right? I know that some people thought that, well, the political leader, Kamala Persad-Bissassa, what she should have done was just ignore. Because if we don't talk about race, then, you know, somehow PNM won't get away with it. But they are. And ignoring, I don't think has worked in the past. I think that the answer is to educate. I think the answer is a very strong pushback. Now, we're not pushing back with hate. So, for example, and I'm very, very grateful to OPUKU for coming on board, because that is where, that's what's going to stop. It's going to stop when those who have gotten to that level of African consciousness unite with those of us who are proud to remain Indian and to proudly declare that we are of Indian heritage. We have to unite and call out what the strategy of the PNM is. We have to begin an aggressive education campaign. So I think, and I can only speak for myself, and I do believe that I speak for that group of unconscious voter. We are told I've told stories all the time of the first time that I voted. I knew to myself that PNM had no manifesto, they had no vision. All the economic knowledge that I had from school, I knew that PNM was not the right choice. But all I kept hearing in my head was that they were the Christian party, they were the Christian party, they were the Christian party. And if I voted against them, I was voting against God. That is the propaganda that kept coming in my head all the time. And it is only through education was I able to make the journey. So I tell people all the time, you can never say that I'm a blind UNC follower, because I never voted for UNC other than voting for myself. I've only through education, through learning the history, through understanding stories, just like what we heard about the walk with McCandle Dagger, just like how we now begin to understand just how deep this propaganda and this division goes. So the more that we educate, and we have to, I speak to our PRO all the time. I say, how do we get history to be popular? And that's why I have taken to TikTok and I am trying Instagram. We have to make political education our focus. We have to find a way to get it. And social media is very helpful, because we have no control over mainstream media. They are, whether we like it or not, they are a PNM party group. And I think that they are even more dangerous, these people that pretend to be independent. So we somehow think that they're speaking from a fair place, and they're not. So this new generation, we're fighting back. We're not, and I know that a lot of people thought, no, she should have left it alone and we should leave it alone and we should ignore it. When you ignore a bully, you empower the bully. And so this generation is committed to pushing back, and we will push back, but we will push back with facts. We are not prepared to push back with equal propaganda and fight in the mud. There is enough history, there's enough political education, but we are going to use it, and we are going to speak until the sun rises again. But I think that is the way that we need to handle it, through education. Knowledge is power, and we are going to ensure that young citizens, 15-year-olds, because they're the next set of people to vote, we have to get that education into the hands of our young people, and that is what we are committed to do.
Thank you very much, Marsha. I want to bring in OPUKU here to respond to Charlene's question. Can you unmute and respond, please? Robin, do you need to unmute him? Okay, well, while we wait, I will invite Dr. Indira Ramprasad with her question or comment. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Let me commend the speakers. I really enjoyed the panel. At the beginning, I told Dr. Mahabir that I am multitasking, and I probably wouldn't have full attention, but I end up giving it more than 100% attention because it was so interesting. I want to commend Dr. Mahabir for this, because it is indeed very, very timely, and it's an interesting topic. And the debate is interesting, emanating from the politicians as it did. And I just want to continue from one of the former questioners on the issue of first name and last name, because what was happening with the politicians is Kamla, Sushila, Prasad Bisesa. Now it's not Sushila, it's Sushila. So the emphasis was wrong to start with. And I don't even know if the minister understood what she was saying, because I think it's Nayala Maraj said that the stress, and she did some research and she posted, I think it's Facebook, that the stress is on the first syllabus, Sushila. So the mispronunciation in itself, whether it was deliberate or it was sheer ignorance, in itself can lend itself to offensiveness. So that's one issue. The second issue, and perhaps the bigger issue, is why the repeated stress on the middle name. Now, I was brought up to think I don't have a middle name, but some people have middle names that are sacred. They're sacred because some middle names are used for patra reading only. I never knew Kamla Prasad Bisesa, and I have studied her. I have commented on her work as a political scientist. I never knew that her middle name was Sushila. And I would never ask anyone what their middle name is, because in Hinduism, we know that some of these middle names are sacred and they are secret. They're really not supposed to be publicized openly. So I don't know if that is the case with her. So one of the speakers also mentioned they didn't know that was her middle name. This was unknown to many citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, that whole issue of the middle name. The other thing is the response from Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And she was responding about the name coming from a slave master. Now that has two dimensions. Was it the first name or was it the last name she was referring to? Because in Nayala Maraj's post, she said the unisex French name Camille originated in the term for young ceremonial attendant to the masters, the high priests of neo-colonialism. So is it the Camille or is it the last name? Because most people of African descent have the names of the slave masters. I have spoken to some people of African descent who are not happy about that. They're not happy, but they said it's a fact, they accept it. They have no control over the last name. They do, however, and people do have, all of us, and one of the speakers said it, have control over the first name. And Marsha gave a fine example of her father naming her Marsha Walker, middle name, whatever it was. My mom named me Indira. Now, I didn't know why until I came to university. And then I went one day to her and I said, why did you call me Indira? And she said, when she was pregnant with me, Indira Gandhi was running for elections in India, and this name was all over the radio. They didn't have TV at the time. It was all over the radio. And therefore, she decided to name me Indira so I would become a politician like Indira Gandhi. Now, I'm not a politician. This was after I studied political science. I found out that. Now, when you go to the malls, sometimes they have these places where you can go and get a printout of what your name means. So names can have, Indian names in themselves can have multiple meanings. So I did one for Indira. I always love my name. I've always been fascinated with its meaning. I looked it up once. I got Ideal Woman. My mother told me I was named after Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India. And this printout said local origin of name, unique and original from the name Indira, meaning faith. Emotional spectrum, sometimes down, but never count her out. Personal integrity, in a world of deceit, Indira's name for truth. Indira stands for truth and integrity. Personality, it's hard to soar with eagles when you are surrounded by turkeys. Relationship, her best friends may not really know her. Travel and leisure, lives for the weekend. Career and money, second only to her friends, her career is most important. Life's opportunities, tried and true, but welcomes new innovations. And a lot of that is true. So what I'm saying is our name in some respects, well, in all respects, it's our identity. It's who we are. It's where we come from. It's part of our roots. And maybe the name Camille, which I like very much, I like French names, maybe it had something to do with where they came from. So what Kamla Prasad Bisesa was saying was not entirely untrue, either for the first name part or for the second name part, that you're named after slave masters, because many of those English last names of people of Afro descent come from slave masters, and many of them do not like it, but they did not have a choice with the last names. So Indira is popular, it's an Indian name, but I was very surprised when I go to Cuba to do research. A lot of Cuban girls, females, have the name Indira. And where they got it is because of the close ties historically between Cuba and India, and when Indira Gandhi was prime minister. And that name has passed down to generations of young Cuban females. So the point is that your name is important. It reflects your identity. Trying to denigrate it by mispronouncing it, misspelling it. By the way, it was being misspelled. And Dr. Rowley put a post on the Facebook, Susheila. Sushila, that is not the way it's spelled, it's Sushilla. Again, people are sensitive to these things. Sometimes it's a genuine error. And Dr. Rowley's quote also talked about this is where it came from. And he gave this image of roots, kunta, kunti. Again, he was referring to the last names, I think. I think that is what we're trying to say. Some people are still baffled as to why the minister would repeat 3 times the opposition leader's middle name. What was the purpose? People asking me from all over the world, what was the purpose of that? Okay. And then the media ran with this, the second part, which is a response from Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And that was the worst thing in the world. Okay, so the point is, someone asks, where do we go from here? I think this is a very healthy debate that we are getting. People are getting things out. I think it's important that we have this discussion, but it's important that we move on. One would have thought, and I couldn't understand it politically, there is no general election. There is only a UNC internal election in the horizon on June 26th. I wonder if the PNM was using this as, some kind of attack on the UNC or on the fortunes of Kamla Prasad Bisesa in the upcoming internal elections. I also commented in the media of whether this has something to do with the rise of some more third forces, the PDP and the party by Gary Griffith, now wanting to take support from the PNM, and whether all of this is an expression of their own political insecurities. But those are other issues to be debated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramdas. I'm forced at this point to ask our next person to hold, please. Mr. Kumar Ramdas, I know you've been waiting a little while, and I'll just ask you to continue to hold. And reason being, I want to ask Ravin to please bring up a video, which was a comment by Dr. Fuad Khan, who is the main contender for the position of political leader of the UNC. Ravin, would you bring that up, please?
I'm sitting here and I think that Trinidad is really a funny place. Imagine the whole of Trinidad, front page of all the Guardian and the Express, have 2, one black, one Indian, fighting about their name. It reminds me of when I was small and I used to help people sell in the Chagonas market. Sometimes you had an old black woman and an old Indian woman. And the Indian woman selling plantain, which yellow, and the black woman selling moko fig, which was green. And one of them, the black woman will tell the Indian woman that how she plantain yellow like she teeth. And the Indian woman will tell the black woman how the moko big and fat like and ugly like she foot. And these 2 old women would just call and cuss each other about the moko and the plantain, and that's what they go do whole day. I can't believe that we have a war in Ukraine with the whole country facing starvation, hurricane hitting around the place, weather nasty. You have all this thing going on, food security going down. You have all kind of shit going on, and yet the papers worry about two old women, one black, one Indian, and both of them fighting about a plantain and a moko. And the moko green and the plantain yellow. What the ass happened to us, boy? We really, really, really is a funny place. Imagine that this place is easy. In fact, one might say how your bald head and your hair wig on, and the next one go say that you just do all kind of thing to your face to look good. And we one way too much of makeup, all way makeup. Man can't wear makeup. Man don't get in that kind of stupidness. I don't understand why the whole paper is talking about two old women fighting because one have moko and one have plantain in a Shogunas market. All it grow up now.
So there we have a comment about the politicization of the name calling issue by the main contender for the opposition leader position. So it doesn't seem that he's too interested in scoring political points as much as he is interested in bringing things back to what are the priorities of the day. At this point in time, let's hear from Mr. Kumar Ramdas. Your hand has been up a long time. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to commend you all on this presentation and the presentations made by most of them. I was very impressed with your presentations, all of you, Marsha, and I hope I'm pronouncing this name properly, Mr. Opunu. I had my hand up specifically to mention racism the world over has always been overplayed and used conveniently for political purposes. And the Africans, blacks, I hope that doesn't offend anybody. Morgan Freeman said it quite nicely. He said, if we stop talking about race in an interview he had many years ago, I think it was on 60 Minutes or something like that. He said, if we stop talking about race and slavery, we will get past the hurt and the anger that we have, that we carry as Black people for slavery. I wrote something many years ago when I heard that. I said, I think I put it on the chat, no two humans and animals or anything are equal and won't ever be. When we stop seeing our differences, we are going to see how equal we are. We are all unique and special and need to look at our uniqueness and specialties and appreciate it instead of quantifying our differences. When we stop noticing that Stevie Wonder is blind and appreciate his music, we appreciate his music. And when we stop seeing that Stephen Hawking is differently abled, we appreciate his genius. When we stop noticing our skin, hair, physical attributes, names, etc., we appreciate how equal we are and how unique our differences make us. Bringing that back into perspective with our discussion with the name calling issue. I think Indira or somebody mentioned it, I don't remember who, and the last speaker, sorry, I don't remember your name, mentioned it. The Rasi name in Indian and our names that we have acquired because of our heritage and our parents, those names are special names, and the Rasi name especially is special and is there for traditional religious reasons. And for that name, if it was Kamla's Rasi name to show up on a PNM platform, obviously some pundit or religious person must have passed that news on to whoever shared that information. And I see that as wrong and unethical of whoever shared that name, if that in fact was in Kamla's Rasi name. Concerning by the way, on the platform, Camille mentioned the name quite a few times, but later on in that particular platform, Lizama Leasing also made fun of the name. Nobody mentions that and it isn't publicized, but she said shoo, 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 la many times when she was introducing other speakers. So that was the play on the names also. Now, the Winford James article, the PNM has always used race, religion, and so on to divide, to rule, ever since Dr. Eric Williams, since 1956. That is how the PNM was able to win elections for the first 30 consecutive years from 1956 to 1986. Religion and race and divisions in the society, class and so on, was used to divide people to rule. The Winford James article was deliberately posted to incite the narrative, to bring it topical. It's a typical PNM strategy, and it causes PNM to win. PNM is the only political party that has ever won because of race and because of division. They are the only. The reason why that happens is because of the aggressive nature in which they, what's the right word? They motivate their supporters, and the culture, the calypsos, Crocos calypsos and Aloes calypsos and all those calypsos, we brandish it as culture. But chutney grew because the chutney singers, the Indian singers and the Chinese singers who went to sing calypso couldn't make it and were never chosen and never selected, simply because they were pushed out. So they started, well, the chutney singers started to sing their own brand of calypso, because that is what chutney technically is. It's the Indian version of calypso. It gives social commentary, and it had to develop separately because they couldn't fit into the calypso tent because of jeering and bickering and non-acceptance in the culture. And that is what the PNM has done with us in elections, and it's a political strategy. I remember growing up, my father insisting, you need to go and vote. And my mother saying, no, I can't go and vote, because when I go to drop the children and people see my finger stained, they're going to say, oh, look, all your loss. Because they will think that I voted for the opposition, which was the DLP in those days. And my mother refused to go and vote. And that is what happens. And we can all remember the Shamfa Kojo's contribution in Parliament is "We time now, deal with it." That is the kind of picong and rhetoric that is in the public space, and people are exposed to it, and the Indian people have to face that every single election. So I am not going to vote, because when PNM win, they're going to laugh at me. If my finger not stained, I will not go to vote. I will not suffer that embarrassment. And that is how PNM gets voter suppression, to reduce the voting, and they win elections because of it, because people don't go to vote simply because they don't like the reprisals. And that is the PNM strategy, and it has always been the PNM strategy since 1956, and it continues to be that. That is why our good friend, Mr. James, introduced the narrative now, because this is an election year, and Kamala is growing in popularity. Everybody knows that, and actually the reason why there was a Kamala, no Kamala, Kamala must go, that was started right after the elections in 2015. They never stopped politicking that idea, and it was inculcated into the minds of the UNC supporters. And it continues today, and it is still going to continue, and we're going to hear about it until the next general election, and it's going to happen. And we have to stand up, as Marsha said, and start speaking out and calling it out for what it is. And I could go on. Yes, I could go on and on. I'm a bit of a hablador. I talk a lot. So basically, that's the contribution, and I'd like to commend you all on the presentation, and kudos to you guys for bringing this to the fore. And this is not just a local issue. It is an international issue of race, and it is being used conveniently. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, sir. And at this point, I would just like to ask Mr. Winford James, who is here with us, whether or not he would like to respond. Mr. Ramdas, you said that Mr. James, or you inferred that Mr. James is an agent for the PNM by having written the article that he did. And I wonder whether he would agree that he was acting for the PNM or whether there were other motives in writing the article. Mr. James, would you care to respond, sir? Robin, please unmute Mr. Winford James if he's attempting to respond.
Okay, so I would like to respond.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. You know, I wrote that article because of a chance remark that a sister of mine made to me with respect to Hardik Pandya, who she said had the sexiest voice in cricket. As I explained in the article, when I focused on Hardik's name, I was not criticizing Indians in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was not criticizing Indians in India. I was mostly concerned about the colonial state of affairs in India, and in Algeria and other places where there was colonialization. And as I explained in the article, assuming that the British named some Indians, the British were brutish in the way that they named Indians. So that turned out to be a false hypothesis. And the article, in fact, indicated that it could be a false hypothesis, but it turned out to be a false hypothesis. Not only that, but it turned out that people were hurt because they thought that I was criticizing Indians. Far from it. What I was doing was to make a hypothesis about British racism and British colonialism. And then the article proceeded to highlight the French case in Algeria, where the French, it is undeniable, named people, the slaves and the other colonials in Algeria with racist names. And the narrative is there. I did not develop that narrative. The evidence is there. You can find it on YouTube. And again, what I was saying is that the French were brutish in the way they named Algerians. It is clear that the French named the indentured servants and the African slaves in Algeria. What is not clear to me is that the British did so in India. But as soon as I wrote that article and I published it on Facebook and so on, people became incensed. But I mean, it's unfortunate that that was a result. And I decided the best way to handle that was to immediately, well, maybe immediate is not the word, but in due course, apologize for the hurt that I had caused. And I did so unreservedly. And since that apology, I have not returned to that issue until this moment that you've invited me to speak. So I just wanted to clarify that. And it's not something I want to continue talking about. And clearly I cannot defend it. I don't wish to do so. But I just wanted to clarify that I was not criticizing Indian naming of themselves and of their children. Far from it. If you go read that article carefully or carelessly, it does not make that point. What it does say is that the British named some Indians, and in naming them, they were being racist. It also goes on to give evidence that the French did the same thing and named indentured servants in Algeria and slaves in Algeria with disrespectful names. So I just thought I would clarify that. And let me just finally say, the last speaker assumes that I am in I'm a supporter of the PNM or I'm an agent. If he has had any sense at all of my political commentaries over the years and what is happening in Tobago these days, he would never make that statement to associate me with the PNM. Far from it. I've never been a PNM person. I've never been an agent. In fact, I have been highly critical of the PNM in the way it does its politics and the way not only Trinidad but Tobago has suffered at the hands of the PNM, the kind of politics that they have been running in this country. So I hope that clarifies the article. And as I have said, I have apologized because that was not the intention at all. But things happen, some bad things happen at times. We are not perfect. I am not. But it's not something I wish to prolong. But as the speaker tied me to the PNM and so on, I thought I should say yes to your question, Madam Moderator, to comment. But that is the clarification that I wish to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. And perhaps it may be well with your one now to write another article, possibly addressing the tit for tat that has now occurred between Camille Robinson-Regis and the opposition leader, because it seems that Camille Robinson-Regis would have fed off of your article and is now using it for her own advantage.
Oh, I didn't even know that she referred to my article.
Well, she didn't outright refer to the article, but it would seem that because it's involving the Indian names, that it might have something to do with feeding off of your article.
Oh, I don't know. But I want to say this. I heard Dr. Fuad Khan talk about the kinds of focus this society has. And he was wondering what kind of society we live in. And he made the point that there were so many more serious issues to talk about. So many more serious issues. And here we are in Trinidad and Tobago, focusing on what he regards as a relatively, while it is important, it's an issue that does not really demand that we spend the kind of quality time that we have been spending on it. But I will consider what you say in relation to whether, in fact, another article is justified. But the clarification I have offered, to my mind, is far more important than the need to support the idea that we should be more respectful of people. I think it's the middle name. The middle name, it should not be uttered in public. Is that what we are being told?
Yes.
That's an opinion. That's an opinion.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so I am not in the business of disrespecting anybody. As an academic, there's no need for me to do that. I can make my point without getting personal and emotional, like I'm saying. But I will bear in mind the suggestion that you are making.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So at this point in time, I just want to invite Dr. David Stubron, who would have presented. Dr. Stubron, go ahead, please.
Yes. I listened carefully to Dr. James, and I also read his explanation. And I find it very strange that a seasoned writer will base an article on a loose hypothesis, which I understand to mean conjecture, guess, a hunch, because you haven't collected data. When you're writing on the newspapers, you have a responsibility to say things that you are sure of, that you would have investigated before. You would have tried to do some research on Indian names. But instead, you just conjured a hypothesis in your minds that the British did them that, and based a whole article which incensed a lot of the population, including myself. And I am very sorry But I cannot accept that sort of half-baked apology. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Stubron, we appreciate your statement. Dr. James, would you like to respond?
No, I don't want to prolong something that I have apologized. I don't know if there's a better remedy, by the way.
All right, noted.
I don't want to join Dr. Subran. He used to be a student at the School of Education, and I never fight wars against students that may have come under my tutelage. If he wishes to doubt the sincerity of my apology, well, that's up to him. But I will not engage Dr. Subran on this matter.
I want to thank you both for sharing your thoughts. And at this point, let me ask Brother OPUKU to please make his closing comments. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I would want to commend you all for having a project like this. I think it is projects like these that contribute to the lifting of understanding and consciousness among our people. In relation to the sister who was saying, about how she feels now as being Indian and stuff, she must know that the secret of life is to have no fear. And what I'm seeing in Trinidad, I'm feeling good about it, because you see, at different points in history, leaders rise. And when I look at some of the people who rise in even within the UNC, I must say that you have to have some faith that that party doing real political work, because politics is really working among the people. You could have all the theories, but you got to get down. And I've seen some young people coming up within the UNC, like the media, the Annie Roberts, and the who I believe in the next 2 or 3 years would rise to some point of political excellence. In terms of Trinidad and Tobago now, I believe that the entrance of Duke, particularly into the urban communities in Trinidad, would give some kind of hope to the hopeless people there who have been left in a state of nothingness by the ruling party. And so that the future, sometimes when it looks gloomy, there's a light around the corner. So have faith. The key thing in this country is unity. We must find mechanisms and ways to unite our people. There will be stumbling blocks on the way, but we got to unite. One love.
Thank you very much, sir. And again, I want to thank all of our presenters who would have spoken today. We learned that names ascribe your identity, your personal characteristics, the date and time of your birth. We've heard from Marsha that is indeed true, because the name that was given to her by her father now represents her personality. She has lived up to that name. She's closer to the person who has given her that name, which is her father. So the person who would have named you has become a significant part of your life. We've also learned that there is indeed some baggage connected with our ancestry that people, irrespective of ethnicity, continues to walk around with. We understand now that your name, this was very important, name survives us after death. It's our identity, hence it's important, and this is possibly why it becomes offensive when people use the name in derogatory ways. So thank you all for enlightening us today. And at this point, I would like to close and invite you all to join us again next week for an interesting conversation on the labor movement. I'm Shalima Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. Let me hand you all over now to our chair, Janine Gilhari.
Thank you, Shalima. Thank you for being an excellent and delightful moderator, as you always are. Thank you to everybody who took the time to participate today, especially to the presenters. As you all know, this is a public meeting being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books and reports. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and like and share our Facebook page, and send us your emails and WhatsApps to continue to build our database. Our topic next Sunday, which is actually on Father's Day, will be Fathers of the Trade Union Movement of the Indian Diaspora. And actually, Sunday is also a public and bank holiday in Trinidad, known as Labor Day. So I think that's all for tonight / this evening. I'm Janine from Belize saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Daniel.
Thank you all very much for coming and enjoying